And for a moment, all are welcome home in the universe. For a moment, all answer the question, is the universe friendly or not, with the answer yes. With this picture in mind of that moment, let me read some more words from Marc as you consider that picture and being there in yourself. Because everyone has heard of this place where everyone treats each other like they're the Messiah. We evoke the Messiah in each other. We evoke the unique self in each other. That's who we are, because who we are is who we evoke in each other. It's what part of us is called to show up when we're together. That's who we are. The root of Messiah is exactly what we call unique self, what we call evolutionary unique self. So we have to evoke from each other our confessions of greatness. So this morning, I would first like to invite you to use your imagination. And I'd like you to imagine that you're in, I guess I could say, in one of my trainings, but imagine you're one of, say, 200 students in a personal growth training, theater style, big room, stage in the front. And it's the fifth and last day of the training. And you all been through a lot up to this point. And there's an exercise on Sunday morning where I, as the trainer, only give the direction begin, which is very different than the rest of the exercises, which are very specific. I just walk in, say, begin. I sit down, stage is there, begin. And a guy, Dr. Dan, medical doctor, who's throughout the training been talking about wanting to connect, feeling disconnected and alone from his patients, from his family, gets up, walks onto the stage, turns, stands there at the microphone, and it's just silent. He's not doing anything. Everybody's kind of collectively holding their breath. So I'd like you to hold that moment. We'll come back to it in a little while. But imagine you're in the audience. Later on, I'll say, imagine you're Dr. Dan. But sort of keep that picture in mind, and I'm going to circle back to it by the time we complete today. But please give yourself permission to use your imagination. Now, next, it's in much of the world, the United States, it's Mother's Day today. Mother's Day. And Mother's Day, as I looked it up on Wikipedia, is a celebration honoring the mother of the family or the individual, as well as motherhood in general. Maternal bonds. The influence of mothers is enormous. The influence of mothers in society. And as Marc has pointed out, as he talked about attachment theory, if we're not loved well by our moms, we're in big trouble for the rest of our lives. So I also want to confess that, I think I won the mom lottery. My mom is just terrific. And I can't remember when I was 3 months old, but I think she held and loved me a lot. I'm pretty sure she did. And so thank you, Mom. And a story that's sort of frozen in time and eternal for me. I think I've shared it with some of you already. My mom died last year at age 95, and we knew it was coming. But as those of you who've been through this know, it's coming is never the same as it's here. And my sister Allison called me. I was in the parking lot of a grocery store. And she called me and said, Mom died last night. And it hit me, and I felt terribly sad, tears. I'm driving down the road crying my eyes out. That was most of the morning. And then in the afternoon, I went for a walk by myself in the woods. And all of a sudden, I'm filled with joy. And I'm going, I felt guilty about feeling joyful. I go, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be feeling this. My mom just died. But I'm feeling joyful. And I was thinking about her life and what a wonderful, terrific mom she was. Everybody loved Grandma Belva. And I'm just filled with joy for her life. And then she appears in front of me, not as a 95-year-old, but as a, probably 35, young, vibrant woman, big smile, like she always had. And I looked at this image and I said, Mom, it's you. You're here. And I'm, of course, sort of in shock. And she looks at me with a big smile and says, of course. What did you think? Yeah, of course. What did I think? I don't know. But that image is still with me today. So I guess I would say God bless moms in the world. And, Jill Biden's in the Ukraine today on Mother's Day. And wow, what a tough time to be a mom in Ukraine. My heart goes out to them. Now, in the last few weeks here at One Mountain, we've been talking about the need for a world religion. And, and in the context of Ukraine earlier, the question of what would we die for? Now, a long time ago, I joined the spiritual but not religious groups. A lot of you can probably relate to that. And if somebody, when I read the definition of dogma, which is a prescribed doctrine proclaimed as unquestionably true by a particular group, I just react. So I would pretty much been in the spiritual but not religious group for a long time. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin as a Methodist. And every Sunday morning, we would go to Sunday school and church. And we had our pew, and nobody better sit in the Nelson pew in the Methodist church, or my mom would give them the evil eye. And I was, I played Joseph in the Christmas pageant, and I was an acolyte. And, that's what we did as Protestants in the Methodist religion in small town Wisconsin. You played Little League baseball, you went to school, you ate, and you went to church. That's what one did. Now, when I was a sophomore at the University of Wisconsin, I was invited back to this church on Student Sunday, where the university students came back and they asked me to do the sermon that day, and other students did different things. Sort of like Mark invited me to come back and do the sermon today on Student Sunday. And I came back right after there had been a huge protest on the Wisconsin campus. I was at the University of Wisconsin at the time. Students protesting Dow Chemical interviewing on campus. And Dow Chemical, of course, made Agent Orange, which was used in the Vietnam War. And there'd been and I was there. I wasn't in the building protesting, but I was outside. And there was a police riot. And my friends, long-haired friends, and which was a big deal back then, were beaten in this police riot. And I was just confused. So I went back to give the sermon, and the topic of the sermon was, Protestants are protesters. Protestants are protesters. And I sort of identified us Protestants with those protesters. And I thought I gave a great sermon. However, at the end of the service, you're supposed to stand at the doorway as people exit. And I was standing there with a minister, and they shake their hands and say something. Nobody shook my hand, and not a single person said anything to me. They just walked past. One person said something. Dr. Peterson, who actually had delivered me, said, well, I don't agree with you, but I respect your right to say it. And my response was, say what? Say what? I didn't even know what I'd said. But in that moment, in that sermon, I became other. I thought I was inside the circle, but after that sermon, I was outside the circle. And I think that moment really added to my moving into the spiritual but not religious groups. Now, jumping forward in time, I used to coach my kids' basketball teams when they were younger. And in where we lived, if you wanted to play basketball, you had to play in the Catholic Youth Organization League because they had the lock on the league. And in my town, we were more about basketball than Catholic. So everybody played in that league, Catholic or not. But some of the teams, especially across the Bay, were much more into Catholic than basketball. And I remember one time we were at the center court at the start, both teams there. The priest comes out And what their tradition was, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And my daughter's standing next to me, and we're out in the center, and I just speak along with the prayer. And my daughter looks at me sort of in shock and says, how did you know that? How did you know that? And it was a disorienting question, because I thought, well, I know that because in my entire youth, from babyhood to leaving for college, we said that all the time, over and over and over and over again. But yet she hadn't. And as a parent, I'd always felt sort of a blank in that space for my kids. I don't want to send them to some place dogmatic, but I had a sense that there ought to be something there. There was sort of a space to be filled, a hole, if you will. And my wife and I often talked about it. And we said, well, we'll just give them our values as best we can. Now, so as a parent, I want to say, I vote for a new world religion. And I think parents would really appreciate and benefit from that new world religion. I know I would have. Now, here in Oregon, my neighbor Nancy is a Episcopal minister, and I've gone to a couple of her services. And the problem I have in going to that is every time, and there's oftentimes in a hymn, I have to say, I confess I'm a sinner. And every time, in prayers and whatever it is, I have to confess my sins and being a sinner. I always feel uncomfortable because I don't need any help in that confession. I can beat on myself about stuff enough. So I caught Nancy later and I said, Nancy, why don't we confess our greatness in church instead of confessing our sins? And she actually agreed with me, but she said, I don't get to change the rules. That all that language and stuff, that's set in stone. And if I violate, I'm in big trouble. Parentheses, that's the dogma. And I said, okay, great. Now I can't join that church, but I like all those people. Now, shifting gears to Ukraine. Ukraine's evoked the question, what would I die for? For which values would I die for? Which evokes the question, what would I live for? Which provokes the question, what have I been living for? Which answers the question, what have I been dying for? After all, each day so far could have been my last. Each day could be my last. Really, what I would die for and what I would live for are both answered in looking at what have I been living for, because they're the same. Now, I am suggesting that searching in your moments of greatness to find your unique self will help you with all these questions. Now, my intention today is about my attempting to confess my greatness, and maybe invite you to do the same at the same time, and to do it without arrogance or humility. Although as we go, it may not quite sound like that's what I'm doing. That's my intention. So with that, David, today's code, please.
So here's this week's evolutionary love code. It's actually a 3-part code. More than confessing their sins, every human being is obligated to confess their greatness. Every human being is obligated to live their greatness. Obligation, duty, honor, and nobility are not merely social constructions of reality. Obligation, honor, and nobility are real. Your greatness is your deepest heart's desire. To confess your greatness is to confess your deepest heart's desire. The fundamental movement of reality is the movement from loneliness to loving, from alienation to integration, from fragmentation to union. This is the movement of Eros. We are not naturally good. We are inherently good. Goodness must be trained. So with that, it's my pleasure to turn my word back to you, Terry.
Okay, thank you, David. And now let me get back and lead back up to Dr. Dan on the stage. As you've heard, for most of my life, I've been a trainer and a coach for large groups. And I have loved doing this my entire life. I feel like I won the lottery besides getting a good mom, getting this job. And now, I wouldn't have said it this way then, but I describe what I was doing there as I was training people's inherent goodness. I didn't know I was doing that then, but after being with Marc, that's what I was doing. And it's what I've given my life for, and I've done it in New York and Los Angeles and Miami and Moscow and Buenos Aires and Hong Kong and mainland China, and worked my butt off at doing it. But, given the state of the world, I haven't got the job done. Parentheses, we desperately need a new story. Now, the trainings I do are not traditional education. They're experiential learning. So they're a collection of exercises where each exercise has a lecturette part where we talk about ideas and experience to kind of feel how it works for you, and then a sharing part where we discuss and make sense out of it. Just repeat small groups, mingles, large groups, and so on. And the whole training, all the trainings are like a Zen koan, where it's about the snake who only knows its character when you put it in a bamboo pole. And when you put it in a bamboo pole, then it can bump up against itself and become aware of itself in a way it's not otherwise. Well, all the exercises are designed for people to bump up against themselves and see and become aware and consider other choices. So my job there is to present the training and support as a coach. And why now in retrospect, I think my trainings work because I'm an unconditional presence in the training. Probably more than the exercises, it's my presence that has it work. It works because I know the secret at the start. Even though they're usually resistant, I know the secret. They want to be loved and they want to love. I want to love and I want to be loved. And I know that, and I'm always talking to that. I keep speaking to their inherent goodness, no matter what they say. And of course, at the beginning of the training, as you can imagine, it's intense. There's lots of resistance. Early on, it's a little rough, even though I have to remind people, look, do you realize that you're paying me to have this conversation with you? Which always sort of stops them in their tracks when they're trying to argue with me about something. I always think about that movie, The Exorcist, where the girl's got the puke, green slime coming out, puking on them, and the priest just keeps looking at that little sign on their chest that says, "Help me." Well, that's kind of what I do in the trainings. I keep reading that "Help me" sign. Now, to digress, one of the most fun trainings I ever did was with a student of one, an eager student, and the student's name was Marc Gafni. Now, Marc wanted to know what I did and how I did it. So I did the whole training in my living room, me standing up, Marc in a chair, going through the training, and just like he was 200 people. And, it was, expansive for both of us. And every time I went modern or postmodern dogmatic, he'd have to call a timeout and we'd have a discussion. Some of you have heard our victim responsible discussion, for which we are going to resolve that. We got a paper coming out in some future months on that, resolving all these dichotomies that we came up with in recent times. Now, back to Dr. Dan walking on the stage. The training he was in was 5 days, 200 people, theater style, went Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, about 6 to midnight, Saturday and Sunday, 10 to about 10. So 40, 50 hours homework, pretty intense training. Day one of the training, I always declare myself, my commitment is to your eulogy, that it say what you want it to say, that it not say whoops. Also, it's a chance for people to say why they're here. And that's when Dr. Dan got up and said, I'm here. I want to get close to people. I want to get close to people. Notice this movement. I want to get close to people. Said it just like that. Day two, victim responsible was big focus. Day three, your word, creating in your speaking. Day four, also on day three, win, lose, your success story. We're in the game together, even though we play separate. Day four, where do you draw the line between me and not me? Now, day four is like a lot of hours, but there's one particular exercise called What Do You Want? Now, this is how crazy it is. For about 10 minutes, you're in a dyad. One partner just yells at the other partner, what do you want? High, low, in, quiet, a lot, loud. And the other partner just has to keep answering over and over again. And, it's kind of if you think about it, it's a stupid exercise. One person just yelling at the other. But what happens is, after a while, people wear out giving bullshit answers. I want a new car. I want a Rolls Royce. I want whatever. And they start getting real about what they really want. Now, consider these answers that start coming out live after about 10 minutes of being yelled at what you want when you kind of get real. What shows up is people want to be desired. They want to be needed. They want to be recognized. They want to be intended. They want to be chosen. They want to be adored. That's what people start coming to at the end of that 10 minutes in that crazy, intense exercise. Not everybody. Now, I must say, when I did that as a student, the first time I did this training a long time ago, I sat there that whole exercise looking around going, well, this is really stupid. That was me in that exercise. Now, by the way, do you remember Jason praying in Don't Look Up when he prayed for, a new car and things? Well, this exercise sort of breaks that up a little bit. I wish Jason could have done what you want intensely, and maybe he'd have got there too. At the end of day 4, there's an exercise called hug line, where I'm not going to describe the whole thing, but there's 2 inner circle, outer circle. And for 2 hours, you just keep stepping left and looking in people's eyes and answering the question for yourself or them. What do you want? What do you want? Next person, what do you want? What do you want? Now, day 5, Mike's on the stage. And I don't say anything other than begin. I sit in the back of the room, and here we are. Dr. Dan walking onto the stage. He walks up onto the stage again, stands in front, turns, and he just stands there. He's kind of struggling, but he's not moving. I'm at the back of the room. Nothing's happening. I feel myself being called forth, and my job is to be able to respond with what's called for. So up to the front of the room, it's now me standing next to Dr. Dan on the stage, and I start talking to him. And as I talk to him, as I've been called forth like that, and maybe you're called forth, I want to read a quote that Marc read a while ago in the discussion of Amazing Grace. And think about Dr. Dan standing there as I read this. I can't do it myself. I need help. Will you help me? I need a trainer. God, will you be my trainer? Amazing Grace, will you be my trainer? Goddess, will you be my trainer? Will you hold me? Amazing Grace, I was lost and now I'm found. Hold me. Train me. I need help. Find me. Amazing Grace, please train me for goodness. I need help. Help me. Hold me. Amazing Grace, will you train me for goodness? Now, as I'm standing there with Dr. Dan, I'm wired up with the microphone and he is too. He's got the big, standing mic. I ask him about what he wants, and he wants to connect. He wants to connect. He talks about his wife has left him. His kids are distant. He wants to connect with his patients, but he can't. He really says, as a doctor, what I do is I hide behind my stethoscope. What do you want, Dan? And he finally says, I want love. Now, as I've been watching him the whole time, he's been doing this. I want love. So I said, okay, going to give you an opportunity, Dr. Dan. I want you to put your hands over your chest, and you don't have to do this unless you want to. And I want you to feel your love you're carrying inside, wanting to come out. And then feel all the times you didn't risk your heart. You kept it covered up. And then with your eyes closed, what I'm going to invite you to do is slowly feel your heart, your love growing in your hand, and extend it out totally to the group. And when you're ready, and if it's true for you, then open your eyes and say to them, I give you my heart. Dan says, okay, I'll do it. All right. And by the way, Dan, you won't know if you don't go, and there's no guarantees on this. They may want it and they may not, but you won't know until you offer. So Dan closes his eyes and he's standing there in silence, and you can see the inner struggle. His hands are trembling. He's coming, he's going through it, and his hands and his love, he's growing out until finally he does hold his hands outstretched, open his eyes, and say to 200 people, I give you my heart. Now, I'd like you to freeze that moment. There's Dan with his heart in his hand outstretched. Imagine you're in the audience. What's happening for you? What's happening for you? Do you feel like moving forward? Do you feel like threatened and moving back? if you imagine yourself as Dr. Dan? Would you offer that way? And as you look there in that moment, think about all the people in your life who, in fact, and I say they are standing next to you, around you, with their heart in their hands outstretched. How is that for you, and what do you do? And who are you in response to that? What's your unique response to that? Does that image call forth your unique gifts, your unique self? Does it call you forth? Because in this moment, intimacy is wanting to happen. There's a shared identity in the context of otherness in the making. Mutuality of recognition, feeling seen, known, and heard. Pathos, feeling felt. Purpose. We are in this together. It's all right there in this opportunity. Consider the questions as Marc has presented us. Where are we? Who are we? What should we do? Who are we to each other? What do we desire? Okay, just be in that moment for a minute. There's Dr. Dan. Group is in silence. Unfreeze. There's kind of a silence for a minute. Nobody moves. And Dan, you can tell he's starting to get scared because nothing's happening. And I stand there and I whisper to Dr. Dan, keep going. And he holds it out there and it gets bigger. And pretty soon one person moves out of the audience forward, and then another. And then it's like the dam breaks and people are streaming out of the audience to get to be on the stage with Dr. Ant surrounding him. And there's this moment where it's just Dr. Dan in the center and people surrounding him, 20 people thick. And it's like there's one breath going on as people just stand there in this moment. And for a moment, all are welcome home in the universe. For a moment, all answer the question, is the universe friendly or not, with the answer yes. And it's a moment, it's a special moment, it's a big moment, it's a we are one moment. And with this picture in mind of that moment, let me read some more words from Marc as you consider that picture and being there in yourself. Because everyone has heard of this place where everyone treats each other like they're the Messiah. We evoke the Messiah in each other. And I think Dr. Dan just evoked the Messiah in everybody in that training room. We evoke the unique self in each other. That's who we are, because who we are is who we evoke in each other. It's what part of us, it's what part of us is called to show up when we're together. That's who we are. The root of Messiah is exactly what we call unique self, what we call evolutionary unique self. So we have to evoke from each other our confessions of greatness. And I say that when Dan was holding out his heart, there was an evocation, an evoking of everyone's greatness in that moment, whether they could figure it out in their minds or not. When we're in each other's presence, wherever we meet, when I'm in the presence of someone from the community of outrageous lovers, this revolutionary community, I just want to confess my greatness. In the old traditions, you would meet the priest and you'd want to confess your sins. We need a new priesthood. It's a priesthood which is democratized, where we evoke from each other our confessions of greatness. Now, I walk back from those people standing, I have to say this, in that special moment. And my ego hasn't been there until that moment. And I got to say, I say to myself, God, was I awesome? Even though that wasn't what I was thinking earlier. And for the rest of the day, it's like there's a bunch of little homo amorses hanging out with each other, and like popcorn, people who didn't quite respond or jump it up and say, I want love. And it just happens for a while. Now, how is this my confession of greatness? Well, I think I allowed this possibility, by speaking to their goodness and not getting off it. I sometimes feel like being a coach and trainer in one of these trainings is like being, a curler, with a big stone in the ice and curling. I'm sweeping in front of them, trying to get them to go that way. I speak to their inherent goodness, and I work my ass off to do that. I get out of their way. I guess my perspective is that I see the love and inherent goodness in them, and I speak only to that. No matter what they say, is really my gift and my confession of greatness. Now, then, having created miracles from the training, as I say, I go home that night, master of the universe, walking triumphantly into my house. And of course, my wife, Betsy, says, "Oh, yeah, before you sit down for dinner, take out the garbage," to keep my feet on the ground. And so, in conclusion, let me just make a statement. In general, I do think creating a new story based on first values and first principles is the best game in town. And to you all, One Mountain congregation, thank you for allowing me to speak now. And I encourage you to live for your moments of greatness, where your unique self and unique gift comes forth, and to have lots of those moments. All right. Thank you all.